Me. Looks like there might be people still coming in, but we can go ahead and get started. I'll give it to our presenters.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation, Noteworthy, a faculty publisher collaboration to scaffold reading strategies for student success. We're here to share our experience with creating an OER textbook, and we'll cover how we came to this project and the experiences we had, where we hope to go from here, and what we learned in the process. My name is Rebecca Campbell. I'm an assistant professor in the School of General Studies at the University of Arizona Global Campus, or UAGC. And the School of General Studies focuses on general education and the courses within general education. My particular focus is on reading and writing, and I'm the author of this textbook.
I'm Jessica Sarah. I am the Senior Development Editor for the editorial team at UAGC. Thanks for abbreviating that, Becky. Um, and I worked closely with Professor Campbell to develop the OER textbook for the Gen 104 course.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Painter. I'm the Associate Director of the editorial team here at UAGC. And it's too generous to say that I'm a part of the team, but I'll be jumping in occasionally during this presentation to provide some publisher notes and context.
So we wanted to share some learning outcomes for this session. We basically want you to understand how this project came about, why we thought it would best serve our students, and to think about how collaboration led not only to opportunities to use OER in creative ways, but also to overcome challenges that may come up when implementing OER. So you can see from the information here that UAGC serves a wide demographic. Many students work at least part-time, they're parents and caregivers, volunteers and community leaders, active duty military members, plus veterans and spouses. They're located throughout the US, and we even have some students on military bases overseas. Since we are an open access institution and 100% online, our students tend to have a more varied skill set from course to course. And on top of that, Gen 104 students are very new to college and may only be in their second college course ever. So they are grappling with how to be an effective student while also trying to learn course content. And while many students do come to the course with confidence, just as many are anxious about their ability to successfully complete college level coursework. So you are probably asking, what is Gen 104? Gen 104 is our college reading strategies course. The creation of Gen 104 came from a concern we had in the first year composition courses. We noticed students were underperforming because they were not completing the required reading. We determined that part of the reason students weren't reading was because they didn't know how to do so effectively, and they didn't see the connection between the assigned reading and the subsequent writing activities. And given our wide demographic of students, we knew there was no one-size-fits-all solution. So rather than prescribing specific strategies for students to use in a composition course, we created a reading strategies course for students to take prior to composition so they would be better prepared, specifically for the writing courses, but also for any subsequent courses. In Gen 104, we provide resources for students to explore so they can find their own strategies. They test the strategies they want to explore on various texts, mostly texts that are typically found in college courses, as well as some texts that are found outside of the classroom. Students reflect on the effectiveness of these strategies and make adjustments accordingly. They learn about different types of reading, different approaches to reading, and the importance of having a plan when it comes to reading for class. And they spend a lot of time reflecting on what works for them so they can create a personalized reading plan. So how did we come to create an OER textbook? When we initially created Gen 104, we wanted to avoid relying on a single source for knowledge. We didn't want students reading about an academic article in a textbook. We wanted them to read an academic article. So from the very beginning, we relied on a number of open educational resources in the form of online textbooks and articles. We wanted students to be exposed to different formats, different author voices, different types of materials. We also wanted students to reflect on their experience with reading those various materials and the different strategies that would help them navigate them as effectively as possible. We did consider a few textbooks during the initial development, but those texts didn't serve the need we sought to fulfill. By using OER, we could compile a wide range of materials for students to study and practice with. Eventually, we were given the opportunity to create a textbook for Gen 104 through the Constellation platform, rather than relying on already published textbooks that didn't fit the needs of the course. During the 5 years the course has been running, we've built up a rich variety of resources for students to explore in terms of finding reading strategies and reflecting on the effectiveness of those strategies. So students didn't need a book of reading strategies, but students could benefit from additional guidance while they are reading. So the approach we took was to pull from the OER we were already using and provide explicit instruction as to how to read those sources. Additionally, since students use a textbook through Constellation in nearly every course at UAGC, it would be of benefit for students to use the Constellation text in Gen 104. But we didn't want students to simply read via the platform. We also saw this as an opportunity to provide guidance for navigating a textbook within Constellation.
Sorry, I needed to come off mute. And this is where the editorial team came in to collaborate with Professor Campbell. Professor Campbell's mentioned the Constellation platform. This is UAGC's e-reading platform, and Jessica and I are part of the custom textbook publishing group that supports that platform. And we work regularly with faculty to create and revise custom learning materials that are hosted on that platform. So as part of the Constellation experience, students have access to the ability to take notes and highlight their material, the audiobook version of our titles, seamless interactivity, and other back-end e-reader features. We charge a platform fee for this user experience, and this is part of the infrastructure we have in place that allows us to invest in our titles without needing to raise funds or secure grants first. To be clear, we do not typically publish OER textbooks, but it is a space we've been interested in, and we saw this as an opportunity to support Professor Campbell with our publishing experience and expertise. As all of you OER creators know, publishing is an effort laden with moving pieces, details, and nuances, and project coordination needs, and my team and I manage all of that every day. I will hand it off to Jessica to talk about how we create an OER textbook in the first place.
Thanks, Rebecca. So as Professor Campbell mentioned, the Gen 104 course was already using OER materials, so that was really helpful as a starting point for us. Professor Campbell gave us a list of the readings that she would like to use in a in a reader style textbook. So my first step was to go through and assess the license types for each of those readings. We knew we were planning to use readings with different Creative Commons licenses, so we needed to better understand how these different license types could be used together in a single resource. So many of you are probably aware that most CC licenses can be easily used together without restrictions, but some, like the non-derivative license type, limits how you can combine content. So we consulted the Creative Commons resource on remixing licensed work, CC licensed work, to make sure that we were adhering to any license limitations. In this process, I actually came across the TV dinner versus the smoothie metaphor for mixing Creative Commons licenses, and I found it very helpful, so I thought I would share it. Essentially, as long as the content is kept separate, kind of like the food in the TV dinner tray, the license types can be used together in a collection of OER works. But once you start kind of blending content together in such a way that it can't really be easily separated from the whole, kind of like the foods in a smoothie, it becomes a derivative work. So in that latter case of the smoothie, non-derivative licensed content really can't be used. So because we knew we were going to use at least one non-derivative licensed reading in the book, we needed to make sure that we were creating a collection of readings and not a derivative work. But this actually needing to keep readings separate from one another became more of a feature than a bug, since Professor Campbell's goal was for students to read and be exposed to different types of readings and different voices. It actually really facilitated that. So once we had that final list of readings, we put them together into 5 chapters to align with the 5-week structure of the Gen 104 course, and we sent those out for reviewer feedback. For our typical Constellation textbooks, we usually recruit internal and external faculty. But for this project, we really felt it made sense to go with UAGC faculty only because they had the deep knowledge of the course and our students that we really, really wanted to make sure we harnessed. So as I mentioned, we went into the planning stage thinking that we were going to kind of create this reader collection style book. But as we actually started development, we began to realize that that might not be the best approach for our students. Three main things kind of shaped how the book ended up during development. It was further discussion and understanding of students' needs, reviewer feedback, and the possibilities that OER presented for addressing those needs and feedback. So for student needs, Professor Campbell obviously brought really deep knowledge of what GEM 104 students needed in terms of support for where they were in their academic journey. And it became clearer that students would need some additional information and guidance before diving into some of the readings that we were using. And then this was actually further reflected in reviewer feedback, which made it clear that we really needed to tease out more of the purpose of each reading for students. Reviewers also noted some confusion over shifts in tone and voice and point of view between the readings. So this again is where we really started rethinking the structure of the book. So we thought about how we could preserve the desired benefits of a reader, like exposing students to different writers, styles, and points of view, while also providing the support students needed. Again, Professor Campbell really took the reins in terms of giving the resource a guiding voice, and she added chapter intros, wrap-ups, features like how to approach this reading and tip boxes. Because most of the content that we selected for this book, sorry, Rebecca, was licensed as CC BY or CC BY Share Alike, we had a lot of room to play. We knew we wanted to preserve the readings as they originally were, as much as possible, but we also didn't want to overload students with longer than necessary readings, and we wanted to be able to customize some of that content so we could provide those aforementioned supports. So open licensing in most of those OER content excerpts were really, really necessary in making it so that we could make those cuts and also add those supports.
Take myself off mute. So as Jessica mentioned, we have 5 chapters: Introduction to Reading Strategies, Informational Reading, Narrative Reading, Academic Reading, and the connection of reading to writing. However, students aren't just practicing to read informational or narrative text. The textbook is designed to engage students in using the skills we want them to practice. For instance, one of the texts we used in the informational reading chapter is about how to use instructor feedback. And it is strategically placed to coincide with the point at which the students should start receiving feedback on their work that they've submitted to the class so far. So students are using an informational text to read about a skill they can start using right away. But we know students may not make this connection on their own, so the OER use in the textbook, as Jessica mentioned, they're bookended with information about the type of text they'll be reading, including the typical features of that reading, what to consider, what to focus on. And we included a feature box before each reading selection, except for the non-derivative, which we decided was okay, and it added to the differences we wanted students to be aware of from text to text. And those boxes explicitly tell students what to focus on. Students are given a lot more direction throughout their reading than a typical textbook might, so they can read as effectively as possible and hopefully carry those skills onto the subsequent courses. The title of the textbook, Noteworthy Reading Strategies in Practice, was very intentional. We felt it focused more on the process of implementing reading strategies versus simply learning about various strategies.
So we've developed a book now. What's next for us? Professor Campbell is going to talk a bit about some opportunities to learn from data, but first I'm going to talk about how we got the book out there in the first place. This was another opportunity for collaboration for us. We knew that we wanted to give back to the OER community, but we didn't know what to do exactly with this new book that we had. We reached out to our library colleagues at the University of Arizona who helped us post the book on the University of Arizona campus repository so the book could have a stable and permanent home. I will post the link in the chat in a bit, but the book is available in EPUB, PDF, and Word formats, and it's also discoverable on OER Commons and Merlot. This was a pilot project for us, but we still see it as a long-term relationship. As a textbook publisher, we will maintain the textbook, make corrections, and then support Professor Campbell when she wants to revise. We're really excited to do more of this kind of publishing in the future.
And the exciting part about using Constellation as a platform is to see what data we're able to pull from the textbook. It'd be really interesting to see how students are using annotation, what sorts of notes they're making, whether the types of annotations they make change in any way, such as an increase or different types, vary from chapter to chapter, but especially from the beginning of the book to the end. And we also have an opportunity to compare students' annotation down the road. Since nearly every UAGC course uses a textbook via the Constellation platform, we have a lot of opportunity to see if students continue their annotations in subsequent courses. And we can also compare students. Since not all students take Gen 104, we could take the textbook from English 121, for example, which is one of our first year English comp courses, and compare the notes taken between students who did take Gen 104 and those who didn't, and see what we can learn from that. If there's anything to learn, I'm excited to see if there's anything there. So we did learn some lessons along the way that we would very much like to share with you. Collaboration was a huge benefit in this project, especially for me being so new to textbook writing. Jessica mentioned earlier that we were able to streamline some of the reading, cutting length where it went off topic from what we wanted. I wouldn't have thought to do that on my own. I would have just used each text as is. And it was vital to collaborate with someone who understood the different licensing types and how to navigate them so we can make effective changes while still preserving that TV dinner that we wanted. And as an instructor, the project was a great reminder of how my students interact with feedback. We know students can feel a wide array of emotions when reading their feedback, and I felt them too every time I got notes from Jessica or from our reviewers. And I knew this feedback would only strengthen the text, so I was able to process it and apply it. But it was a reminder that my students who are so very new to college and new to reviewing feedback, that it's a much more difficult process. So I've been much more intentional. I feel like I've always been intentional, but I feel like I'm even more intentional with how I share that feedback with them.
And you were great with all the feedback, so I appreciate how well you worked with all of that. Some lessons I learned more from the editorial side or kind of the OER specific side. Not to keep harping on the non-derivative license, but I will say that a takeaway from working with that license was just to be very judicious when deciding whether to use that non-derivative license, either to license your own content or within a collection of content. Initially, it did throw up some roadblocks for us. I think we got creative with how to work around them, which is always a great challenge. But it came up as a little bit of a challenge later in the process as well, because we found that there are some, I think there are repositories where you can post your OER content that don't actually accept the non-derivative license type. So finding out more and more as we go, it's always a learning process. But I will say on the flip side, OER and CC licensing is also very open to being changed or even waived, which is something I hadn't realized initially. So further digging into ways to kind of work with licensed content that seems limited actually gave us hope, I guess, for next projects should we run into that sort of licensing. I would approach an author and see if they would be open to revising or even waiving the license type they were using. I think Creative Commons really is a community that offers a lot of support, and I will make sure to dig into that support more in the future now that I'm more aware of it. And then just another idea or another takeaway for me was how OER really is such a valuable opportunity to meet our students where they are. I really felt like I could come to an OER book or some content that someone else might. We would do totally different things with it because of the way it's licensed. And we could come away with custom books for our own different student audiences that really met separate needs. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And it's a very difficult thing to do with copyrighted content or, you know, anything that has a lot more restriction on it. So, and it's much more affordable. I know that, you know, if anyone's aware of working with clearing copyright, it's quite a long and expensive process. So yeah, I think it's exciting to be part of the community, and I'm excited to share back.
So we want to take a moment first to thank you all for attending. Our contact information is on the screen if you have any questions that you think of maybe down the road and want to reach out to us, please do. And now we'd love to answer any questions if there are any.
Professor Campbell, I thought it might be interesting if you talked a bit about how you went about finding all of the OER that went into the Gen 104 course.
Google and patience. It I had started collecting resources. I before this was Gen 104 was even like a seed in anyone's mind, and I learned as a younger instructor to start bookmarking what I come across and organizing it so I could find it again. So thankfully for that, when Gen 104 was kind of given the green light, let's go ahead, let's make this course. I already had a lot of sources I was using in the writing courses that I didn't really recognize it at the time, but they were OER sources. And then there's OER Commons and all of that. So it was a lot of vetting and then using Google to find the pieces that were missing that I wanted to make sure were included in a reading strategies course. And so much reading. And there was so much that I didn't end up using because it just didn't fit in the course or suit what we needed. And then as we've increased our focus on accessibility for students, there's some sources we haven't been able to use. But that's basically it. It's a lot of time and patience. If you find a resource that you really like, bookmark it so you can find it later in case you ever need it again.
It looks like there is a question in the chat now about being able to read the book online versus just having to download it.
Yes. I wanted to make sure that there was a stable home for the files, and so that was why we chose the UA Campus repository. At this point, we don't have an external e-reader. The Constellation e-reader is in use at UAGC, but not elsewhere. I'm not sure, Sherry, if I'm getting at the question that you're asking, but I think it was mostly the options available to us rather than any specific decision that we made. That's a great point.
Uh,
Oh, go
can
ahead.
hi,
Yeah.
can I ask you some questions? It's a great presentation. Thank you so much. Okay, I have a very dumb question, maybe, but how, if we have some ideas of publishing OER textbook kind of thing, that's what you guys did, right? So, what is the process of publishing? Like, um, how to where to contact, or how is the process, how long it takes, is it too overwhelming or something, that's, yeah, I just want to know your ideas or thoughts on it.
It's a great question. How long do you have? Um, I could talk about publishing for quite some time, but I mean, Professor Campbell might be, I mean, I don't know if you want to from your perspective, because I feel like sometimes I'm too close to it as far as being able to talk about it. But I can tell you that we started planning this we started talking about it May 2023. And we published the book February, this month in 2025. So it's definitely, I would say we probably got underway maybe December 2023, January
January 2024.
2024. Okay. Yeah. So, and I would say, I think from what I know, that is a fairly aggressive schedule. I think when I talk to other folks in the OER community, a lot of people we all have day jobs, right? So, I think a lot of people kind of have much, much longer timelines. We had kind of this we had kind of an urgent schedule, if you will. So, I know
Mhm.
Professor Campbell felt a lot of that heat, I would say. Um, I guess,
Yeah, another
okay, sorry, go
add-up
ahead.
question maybe. How many reviews they gonna go on a textbook, or you have 5 chapters in your textbook, right? So where you send your chapters for the review, and who reviews your chapters in your textbook? How many reviews they gonna go through? It's like something like publishing a research paper only, right? As a textbook means. Yeah, so I have this kind of questions in mind.
Oh, that's a great question. So for this book, we had 5 reviewers from the University of Arizona Global Campus. Typically, we'll have a little bit of a larger review board, but because this was an open educational resource, we knew that cost is always an issue, or not an issue, but a concern. But we were able to offer a small honorarium, which helps definitely in recruiting reviewers. And we had them review the initial chapter, just kind of the straight reader version of it, which is where we ended up getting all that great feedback about, who's speaking now, and what students really should have this in it. And then we went back to them with any major changes, to make sure that, we were kind of hitting the mark, and not missing any blind spots or anything. And we recruited from faculty who had taught the Gen 104 course at the university, because we really wanted to make sure we were getting feedback from people familiar with the course and with the students.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think
Sorry for, yeah.
no, it's okay. Again, I can talk about publishing for a long, long time, but like I think sometimes having, I think for me, I like having at least 3 reviewers, and then I would
Mm,
just think about your community, right? You're going to be the expert. You know who else
mm,
should be who would you want reviewing
mm,
your work,
mm.
right? And providing feedback.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you guys are even like giving some honorarium to the reviewers, right? Usually in the publishing sector, like a research area, we don't give any honorarium, right? Anybody, reviewers do it all by like generous basis.
And I wouldn't say you get rich doing getting
Yes, yes, of
honorarium,
course.
but it's a token of appreciation.
That's
We know it takes time.
that's really great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much.
And looks like we have 2 minutes left if anybody has any final questions.
I think it's interesting. If no one has any questions, I was going to ask Jessica to talk a little bit about how she handled attribution, given that she had this TV dinner situation. Um, yeah, I'm interested, since I was kind of not in the weeds with her, how she went about doing it. Where's the attribution? How do you clearly demarcate all of these different types that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it feels like there are definitely good guidelines on the Creative Commons website, but there isn't necessarily one obvious way to do it for everything. So we definitely followed their guidelines for anything that was a visual, such as like a figure or an image, anything like that. We made sure we put the exact kind of, see, I actually did it for the TV tray as an example, but made sure to put all of the required information and linking in the right below that image or figure. And then for the readings, we actually decided to put the attributions at the end of the chapter. So there is a section at the end of each chapter that calls out each reading and explains where it came from, has all the linking involved. So it's similarly formatted to make sure that we're meeting the CC guidelines, but those all live at the end. It felt like a better way to do it instead of putting all that information right at the front of a reading, because that can be a bit distracting. But I could definitely see making it work that way too. I think some readers like compiled of OER content do it that way, or they'll put it in a footnote. We tend not to use a lot of footnotes in Constellation, so that wasn't really an option we decided to go with. Yeah, I think it can get a little wordy at the end when you're like, well, this came from here and then this came from here, but it's necessary, and it keeps, it keeps things clear for whoever comes to that content later and wants to reuse. We want to make sure we're very clear about who created what. They get credit.
Thank you. That's always a hard, I think, thing to address, right? So thank you all for your presentation. We've hit time, so we go ahead and go to our next session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much,
you.
everyone.